Hey guys, I hope you're still doing well, that you and your families are staying safe during this time. My grandmother and I have not been anywhere for 2 weeks, so it's interesting. I hope you guys are also enjoying reading this book. Uh, it's very exciting. I had kind of forgot, like, I remembered how exciting it was. It's one of my favorite books personally, but it's fun to actually get to reread it and to remember how exciting and engrossing this kind of book is. Um, so we're just going to dive right into it. So there's about 6 passages that I want to look at with you guys, which is about the number that I'm trying to aim for in these videos. So first off, we are going to talk about Dr. Caldwell, who's awful, on page 98. For Melanie, again, page 98, she becomes a villain in the text. And so because she becomes a villain for Melanie, I think she becomes a villain for readers as well. We understand her motivations. She wants to find a cure, but in her efforts to find that cure, she also seems to be self-serving in terms of her own ego, and she doesn't communicate with other humans. She doesn't relate to other humans well. It's just not a good portrait of a scientist. It's not flattering. Oh, something else that was really funny that I was thinking about mentioning. I love how whenever whenever she's like watching Melanie, like in a hungry mode, whenever she like attacks those two junkers, or later Miss Justineau just like drops Melanie. From Miss Justineau's perspective, Melanie starts to be described as a cat. Which I think is kind of hilarious. Okay. This is on page 98 again. This is whenever Melanie has been taken to the lab to be dissected. Thank God that doesn't happen. But okay. Melanie kind of realizes what's going to happen and starts freaking out. So I'm going to start about in the middle of page 98. And suddenly, like seeing the other side of an optical illusion, she knows what that something will be. They're going to cut her up and put pieces of her in jars like these pieces of other people all around her. She throws her weight against the strap, struggles desperately, but they don't move at all. Should we try some isoflurane? Dr. Selkirk asks. Her voice is unsteady. She sounds like she might be going to cry. They don't respond, Dr. Caldwell says. You know that. I refuse to waste one of our last few cylinders of general anesthetic, making the experimental subject feel vaguely drowsy. Please remember, doctor, that the subject presents as a child, but is actually a fungal colony animating a child's body. There's no place for sentiment here. I find this passage really interesting because what a lot of you guys were also gesturing toward in some of your responses to Annie's questions last time were the ways in which Melanie is set up for us as a character, and how we are meant to question, as I mentioned in previous videos, what makes somebody human, where we draw the lines at where we extend human compassion to, and do we extend agency and compassion in a kind of human way to things that are deemed non-human too. So here, for Dr. Caldwell, Melanie is just a fungal colony animating a child's body. Melanie, the being that is Melanie, does not actually exist to Dr. Caldwell. She is simply a fungal colony, which is just a collection of spores that animates like a living kind of corpse, a zombie. In some ways, this extends a lot of interesting agency to the natural world if you do imagine a fungal colony is controlling Melanie, but we know just from Melanie's perspectives, in which this particular chapter is written, that that's not the case, that Melanie is not just a fungal colony, that there's some kind of consciousness and person in there. And Miss Justineau is really, really able to see this too. And so the book keeps going back and forth and kind of teeter-tottering for us about this. And so it also makes you wonder, though, whenever Dr. Caldwell is like, it's just a fungal colony. She doesn't extend agency to a fungal colony either, which I think most of us would not think to do. So if I step outside, we have like a kind of closed in porch area, and then like an actual open wooden kind of back porch slash tiny little deck on the back of the house. And there's an oak tree right next to it. And if you step off the porch and you go over on the side where the oak tree is, you'll just find moss like scattered throughout the grass. And that I always think about that moss whenever I read about this fungal colony, because I'm thinking about how to explain this. It's a living thing, right? How much agency can we extend to it? Kind of becomes a question here. And Dr. Caldwell suggests that this fungal colony has a lot of agency, but she doesn't extend human compassion and care to it. That it doesn't matter if it's alive. It's just this fungal colony. It's a real person, so we can do whatever we want to it. It's that kind of exploitation of the natural world that ecofeminism really critiques, and we see Dr. Caldwell buying into the kind of Western master model notion that you can exploit the natural world however you want. We understand that Melanie is a person and she's more than just a fungal colony, but it's also a kind of interesting perspective to look at this moment. And then all hell breaks loose because I forgot how funny it was. I don't know if you guys found it funny. I find it hilarious whenever there's just like these bulldozers and these junkers driving the Hungries at top speed to the base. It's so ridiculous. Like, it's supposed to be kind of ridiculous, so it's kind of hilarious in that sense. But it's also supposed to be terrifying because it's like, oh no, oh no. And that's basically what it ends up being like. Like, it's just an absolute shit show for everybody involved, including some of the junkers that decide that they are going to attack Miss Justineau. So let's go to pages 113 through 115. This is basically a whole short chapter from Melanie's perspective, and I think it's worth checking out because this is the first time that Melanie actually acts like a Hungry. We've seen her kind of have those inclinations and kind of wrestle with it and push away, but here, in order to protect Miss Justineau, she really kind of embraces that hungry, that zombie nature that she has. Okay, starting in 113. The shock of that first taste of blood and warm flesh is so intense that it almost makes Melanie faint. Nothing in her life has ever been this good, not even having her hair stroked by Miss Justineau. The rush of pleasure is bigger than she is. The part of her that can think bends in that cataract, broad-sided, and clings to whatever it can to keep from being swept away. So in other words, the rush of pleasure is so intense that it threatens to overwhelm her and actually make her kind of mindless. And she realizes that, and she's like trying to cling to her selfhood so that doesn't happen. And so that's what she's doing in the next paragraph. She tries to remind herself what's at stake. She attacked the man because he was going to hurt Miss Justineau, not because of the irresistible flesh meat smell. She didn't catch a whiff of that until she was astride him, and she bit down before she'd even thought about doing it. Her body didn't need her permission for this, and it wasn't prepared to wait. Now she bites and tears and chews and swallows, the sensations filling her and battering her like the torrent of a waterfall pouring into a cup held right under it. Something hits her hard, dislodging her from her prey, from her meal. Another man stands over her, leans down towards her, a knife raised in his hand. Miss Justineau tackles him from behind, her hands beating at his head. He has to turn to defend himself, and Melanie is able to get a solid grip on his leg. She wraps herself around him. Sorry, this isn't supposed to be funny. I just have a really sick sense of humor. Lifts herself effortlessly off the ground with her strong arms, locks to him like a limpet. It's not funny. Stop it. The man bellows incoherent curses and hammers at her frantically. The blows hurt, but they don't matter. Melanie finds the point where leg joins body, driven by that same instinct so deep she can't tell where it comes from. She fastens her teeth onto the man and bites through the leg of his pants until the blood wells thick and spurting into her mouth. She knew it would. She sensed the arteries singing to her through folds of flesh and fabric. So in other words, she bit the back of his leg, or the side of his leg, basically, where your hip kind of connects to your thigh, and you have a huge artery there. And Melanie, because she's technically a predator, and these men are actually labeled as her prey here by the book itself, is able to actually sense, because she's a hungry, because she has this fungus growing inside of her, where to bite in order to get at the artery. A lot of predators in the wild actually have this kind of ability. The man's scream is a scary sound, shrill and wobbly. Melanie doesn't like it at all, but oh, she likes the taste, likes the way his opened thigh becomes a fountain, as though raw meat was a magic garden, a hidden landscape that she never glimpsed until now. It's too much finally. Her stomach and her mind aren't big enough. The whole world isn't big enough. Numbed with delight, with repletion that melts her muscles and her thoughts, she doesn't resist this time when hands pluck her loose and lift her up. From under the reek of chemicals comes the Miss Justineau smell, familiar and welcome and wonderful. Pressed to Miss Justineau's chest, she emits a satiated purr. Say a cat again. She wants to curl to sleep there like an animal in its burrow. But she can't sleep because Miss Justineau is moving, running fast. Each footfall jars Melanie. Melanie is also, like, naked this whole time and has, like, blue goo covering her shaved. It's just ridiculous. And the full feeling doesn't last. Her torpid hunger rallies quickly, prods at the edges of her mind with eager intimations. Already the smell means something different, is urging her to feed again. She turns and wriggles in a grip too weak to contain her, butts with her head against the underside of Miss J's arm, mouth open to bite again. And here we see, again, another kind of... It's not quite... You would almost think that Melanie would kind of act plant-like, because she contains a fungal infection, but she becomes very animalistic, actually, and maybe that's why the book keeps kind of hilariously, in my opinion, throughout this whole mess, giving her the qualities of a cat. A cat is kind of small and cute, but cats are also really successful hunters and predators, and Melanie is kind of the same way, small and cute, but also like a really terrifying predator, when she allows that capability to kind of bubble to the surface. But she can't, she mustn't, she can't. This is Miss Justineau who loves her, who saved her from the table and the thin, scary knife. Melanie can't stop her jaws from closing, but she jerks her head back at the last moment so they close on air instead of flesh. A growl wells up from inside her, from that same place that mewled like a kitten only a few moments ago. Has to, mustn't, has to. She wrestles with a wild animal, and the animal is her, so she knows she's going to lose. Again, we get that kind of animalistic imagery for Melanie that I just mentioned, but we also see, once again, the book reiterates to us that she is able to some extent to control herself, that she kind of like reins herself back in using her own consciousness, and this is an ability that the adult hungries don't seem to have, but that Melanie as a child does, and it's, without giving anything away, it's for a very specific reason that you will find out why she's and others like her are able to over the course of the book. It's really very interesting, actually. Okay. And then let's go to page 126. And while we're doing that, there was a point in the first reading of the novel that I had you guys do, like the first section that you all read, where Melanie, they were asked to write a story by one of their teachers, and Melanie wrote about rescuing Miss Justineau, and we actually see throughout these scenes that kind of story actually come to life, and so I want to, oh boy, am I gonna sneeze? But oh my god, I think I rattled my brain around with that one. Okay. Oh my god, I really did rattle my brain. I'm sorry, you guys. Yes, so I really rattled my brain. So we can talk about that story that she wrote where she imagined kind of rescuing with Miss Justineau and how that actually plays out in real life here. So page 126, I'm going to start at the top. Are you okay? Miss Justineau asks again. Melanie nods, but it's a lie. She's not okay, not yet. She doesn't know if she'll ever be okay again. Being strapped down on the table with Dr. Caldwell's knife in front of her eyes was the scariest thing that ever happened to her, again showcasing Melanie's capacity to feel human emotions. Until she saw Miss J about to be killed, and then that became the scariest thing, and now it's the thought of biting and eating pieces of those two men. However you look at it, it hasn't been a good day at all. She wants to ask the question that's burning a hole through her heart because Miss Justineau will know. Of course she will. Miss Justineau knows everything, but she can't ask because she can't make the words come out. She doesn't want to admit that there's a doubt, a question there. What am I? So she says nothing. She waits for Miss Justineau to speak, and after a long time Miss Justineau does. You were very brave. If you hadn't come along when you did, and if you hadn't fought those men, they would have killed me. So again, Melanie kind of fulfills, like her story was almost this fulfilled prophecy where Miss Justineau was in trouble from these kind of terrifying figures, and here she comes along and saves Miss Justineau. Miss Justineau says to her, I wouldn't have survived if you hadn't helped me. But the way in which Melanie saves Miss Justineau gives her pause, because she realizes something's not quite right here. Why was I in this experiment? Why was I taken to the lab? Why did I have the urge to attack those men? Why did I enjoy eating them? Why is all of this happening to me? So at the beginning of the novel, we saw that Melanie just viewed herself as a child. After all hell breaks loose via hungry stampede and junker nonsense, Melanie starts to wonder and begins to realize that something else is really going on with her, that she is not who and what she thought she was. And a decent portion of the novel is her kind of being like, ooh, okay, which is a kind of uncomfortable sensation. She realizes that she is other than and different from. And then I want to go to page 135. Something that the text starts to take up at this point more consistently and clearly too is kind of biblical notions of, and I'm talking like Christian biblical notions of God, and it doesn't necessarily do so in like a preachy way or in a necessarily direct way. It does so in a kind of interesting way. We've had in the past all these stories about the goings-on of gods, especially in relation to the Greek pantheon, in which Zeus was the head of it, and in relation to the story of Pandora, which we know relates to Melanie's own story, because she and Pandora are both the girl with all the gifts. But now, for Melanie, Miss Justineau becomes a kind of god too, and I want to point this out starting on the bottom of page 134 and then just that very top paragraph of page 135. It doesn't matter, she explains to Miss J. I want to be where you are, and I don't know the way back to wherever I was before anyway. So they were talking about, Miss Justineau was like, you could just hang out here, you could come with us since we've escaped the base. I don't even remember it. All I remember is the block and you. Now it's Melanie's turn to hesitate. She doesn't know the word for this. You are my bread, she says at last, when I'm hungry. I don't mean that I want to eat you, Miss Justineau. I really don't. I'd rather die than do that. I mean, you fill me up the way bread does to the man in the song. You make me feel like I don't need anything else. So if we go back to Christian biblical thought, the idea is in the figure of Jesus that his body is the bread, his blood is the wine. And for in the way that kind of like the Godhead works, it's this kind of triangular figure where you have God the Father at the top, the Holy Spirit, and then Jesus, which is God's kind of merciful human form that was temporarily given flesh. And Miss Justineau, in being related to bread, actually kind of fills this interesting savior godlike role for Melanie. And if you think about it, Melanie was saved by Miss Justineau in the lab, although Melanie also turned around and saved her back. So Miss Justineau does occupy this savior place. Miss Justineau is also this source of learning and wonder, which in like the early Bibles or the early chapters of the Bible, God actually fulfills too, for Adam and Eve in particular. I thought I saw a cat again, and so Miss Justineau becomes this kind of godlike figure. She is this bread. That is going to be really important to remember, that Miss Justineau as bread is also relegated to a godlike figure for the end of the novel. It's really, really important. So just like keep that in the back of your mind. And then I want to talk about nature in the aftermath. So my allergies are driving me nuts, you guys. It's like the weather doesn't know what the hell it wants to do. And also, I'm allergic to the Clorox products that they recommend you use to clean, which I use to clean. And then also, I'm technically allergic to cats, and there's 2 in this house. So my allergies are just like, ugh, all the time. Okay. So after the breakdown, which is what the characters in the novel refer to as kind of like the end of the world as it previously was, a lot of the world was abandoned. And so nature has this opportunity to kind of take over, and Melanie gets this interesting view of it as they are making their way further and further from the base to try to get back to Beacon. So starting at the very beginning of page 146 and then basically to the break on page 147. Melanie builds the world around her as she goes. This is mostly countryside, with fields on all sides, rectangular fields mostly, or at least with roughly squared-off edges, but they're overgrown with weeds to the grown-ups' shoulder height, whatever crops that were once planted with swallowed up long ago. Where the fields meet the road, there are ragged hedges or crumbling walls, and the surface they're walking on is a faded black carpet pitted with holes, some of them big enough for her to fall into. In other words, potholes worthy of Pittsburgh. A landscape of decay, but still gloriously and heart-stoppingly beautiful. The sky overhead is a bright blue bowl of an almost infinite size, given depth by a massive bank of pure white cloud at the limit of vision that goes up and up and up like a tower. Birds and insects are everywhere, some of them familiar to her now from the field where they stopped that morning. The sun warms her skin, pouring energy down onto the world out of that upturned bowl. It makes flowers grow on the land, Melanie knows. And algae in the sea, starts food chains all over the place. A million smells fright the complicated air. A few houses they see are far off, but even at this distance, Melanie observes the signs of ruin. Windows broken or boarded up, doors hanging off their hinges. One big farmhouse has its roof all fallen in, the spine of the roof making a perfect downward-pointing parabola. She remembers Mr. Whitaker's lesson, which feels like a very long time ago now. The population of Birmingham is 0. This world she's seeing was built by people to meet their needs, but it's not meeting their needs anymore. It's all changed, and it's changed because they've retreated from it. They've left it to the hungries. Melanie realizes now that she's been told all this already. She just ignored it, ignored the self-evident logic of her world, and believed, out of the many conflicting stories she was given, only the parts she wanted to believe. Rather mature for her age, because she is incredibly intelligent. What I find most interesting there is at the end of that penultimate paragraph, so second to last, they've left it to the hungries. In other words, they've left the world to the hungries. And what's interesting is, again, you see the natural world recovering, taking over, growing over, and decaying human buildings, and the human world is receding, whereas the natural world is flourishing in its place. And it's interesting that Melanie notes that humans have left this world to the hungries, because the hungries are animated by a part of the natural world, by this fungus, by cordyceps. And so it's as if the natural world, through cordyceps, has fought back against human dominion over it and has retransformed the world so that it becomes more friendly to the natural world again. This is really fascinating and kind of terrifying to think about at the same time. And then the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is perhaps the most, I mean, like, there's a lot of shit that happens in this section of the novel, but I think the most startling thing is whenever Dr. Caldwell encounters that Hungry who is pushing a baby carriage. And so that's on pages 181 through 182. Also, didn't you just want to strangle Dr. Caldwell? It's like you couldn't have just not been an idiot, because then they all ran after everybody and attacked. Okay, whatever. We're going to start about a third of the way down on page 181. So this is from Dr. Caldwell's perspective. One of the Hungries is walking down the center of the road, a female, biological age when she encountered the Ophiocordyceps pathogen, probably late 20s or early 30s. She seems quite well preserved, unblemished apart from... It's not supposed to be funny. Pave. Unblemished from bite damage. Unblemished apart from bite damage to the left side of her face. Only the gray threads around her eyes and mouth indicate how long it must have been since she left the human race. She's wearing tan trousers, a white blouse with quarter-length sleeves. It's ridiculous. Stylish summer wear, but the effect is somewhat tarnished by the fact that she's got one shoe missing. In her long, straight blonde hair, there's a single cornrow braid. It's not funny, but it's just ridiculous. It's so ridiculous that it becomes the absurd. And so I can't help but laugh at it. She's pushing a baby carriage. Wow, out of the two things that make this impossible. Sorry, you guys. Caldwell is arrested by the least remarkable. Why is she walking? Hungries either run when they pursue prey or stand still when they don't. There's no intermediate state of leisurely perambulation. And then, why is she clinging to an object? Among the myriad things a human being loses when Ophiocordyceps infiltrates the brain and redecorates is the ability to use tools. Are you sure, Caldwell? She's been wrong about a lot of things. The baby carriage ought to be as meaningless to this creature as the equations of general relativity would be. Well, rude. Caldwell can't help herself. She advances crabwise to intersect the female Hungry's trajectory. Sorry, you guys. Careful at these close quarters to watch her only out of the corner of her eye. Out of the corner of her other eye, she's aware of Parks raising his hand in a halt gesture. She ignores him. This is too important, and she can't in conscience let it pass. Oh, God. She stands full in the path of the oncoming carriage, the shambling ex-woman. It bumps against her. It's an it for Caldwell. The hungry woman is an it, not a person. With minimal force, and the woman stops dead. Her shoulders slump, her head bows. Now she looks the part, the lights going out, system powering down until something happens to kickstart it again. Parks and the others have frozen. They're all looking Caldwell's way, watching this play out because there's nothing they can do now to influence it. By the same token, it's too late for Caldwell to worry about whether her E-blockers will work at point-blank range, so she doesn't. Moving with glacial slowness, she comes around to the side of the carriage. From this angle, she can see that the Hungry has more injuries than was immediately apparent. Her shoulder has been torn, flesh hanging there in desiccated strips. Delicious. Blah. The white blouse isn't white at all at the back. It's black from neckline to hem with ancient crusted blood. Inside the push car, or the baby carriage, there's a row of ducks on an elasticated string. It's not funny, which bob and rock in a desultory dance in a big yellow blanket, dusty and rucked up, which hides whatever else might be there. The Hungry doesn't seem aware of Caldwell at all. That's good. The doctor makes her movements even more gradual, even more unhurried, reaches out her hand to the topmost edge of the blanket. She takes a fold of the thick, stiff fabric between finger and thumb. Slow as a glacier now, she peels it back. The baby has been dead for a long time. Two large rats, nesting in what's left of its ribcage, start up at once and leap with shrill squeals of protest over Caldwell's left and right shoulders. This is really interesting because we know that from a kind of scientific perspective, which Dr. Caldwell represents throughout this novel, that it's supposed to be whenever people are infected with the cordyceps fungus, that they lose all human consciousness, all human self is just gone. It's lights out. And essentially the person is transformed into a kind of vessel or container for the fungus, and that it seeks ways to propagate itself and continue to spread through bite in particular. And so what's interesting here is that this hungry is a mother, obviously, and she's pushing her baby carriage, and that's what she did in life as a person, and that's what she continues to do in death. She acts out this very maternal and kind of motherly role, even in her death, that she pushes the remains of her baby around. It's a kind of gruesome image. I find it hilarious because I just think it's absurd and ridiculous. Not that I don't think within the realm of the book that this could happen, but just because it's like, oh my god, what am I looking at right now? So it kind of calls into question further. Melanie calls into question, of course, and we know this, the capacity of hungries and whether or not they still retain some sense of humanity. This mother hungry calls into question that as well. As did earlier, there was a priest, a priest that had been turned into a hungry, that attacked them whenever they went and were checking out a church so that they could hunker down for the night in like a storage area out back. And Parks notes that sometimes certain hungries don't just stand around wherever they stopped running after prey and stopped feeding. They actually return to places that used to be important to them, it seems like, and that's evidenced by this priest who apparently returns to the church and has stayed there. So there's something interesting going on. It comes to a matter of, is this just habit for the hungry? Is there some kind of wiring left over that says, this is the action that I must take? Or is there something more kind of happening? Is all human consciousness totally eroded once the fungus has kind of really gotten into the human body? Again, the book continues to question, what do we count as human? What are the limits of the human? And this is really interesting to think about, too, in terms of the way that we treat marginalized groups of people, that traditionally we have treated marginalized groups of people as lesser than human. And so the book is making a kind of interesting social commentary on that as well. It's like this kind of scary, in my opinion, hilarious zombie novel, but it's making these kind of really big philosophical moves too. I hope that was helpful. I'm sorry that I could not keep myself from giggling while I was reading the book. I will try to behave myself in future, I don't know, episodes of whatever the hell this is, but I don't promise anything, you guys. I hope you continue to enjoy the novel, and that you guys are staying safe and well. If you have questions about your essay, remember that you can 100% contact me at any time. I'm checking my email daily, even on the weekend. So, all right. Goodbye and happy reading.